Why did Galderma think that this was needed for the market? I mean, I think
You would have to ask them.
So you started to talk about the differences between the product in terms of onset and how long or longevity of results. Can we maybe just go through those a little bit? I think that's probably the question that's on everyone's mind is what is the difference other than the slight variation on the name, which makes things confusing because I'm sure we're probably going to rename it something else here in Australia. So there's going to be four different products with two products with four different names. But if you could just maybe run through the differences, and I'm sure that'll lead to some other questions that we might have that come up.
Well, I'm curious to know.
Absolutely.
I mean, and maybe we should have started with this. Why did Galderma think that this was needed for the market? I mean, I think
you would have to ask them.
Well, what's your sort of? I guess having used it yourself, the practicalities of having a liquid toxin seem pretty obvious. You walk into your clinic, and immediately it's made. And you just take
Actually,
out.
it's more than that. It's more than that. So when I first was exposed to the idea of a liquid neuromodulator, just as you just said, why would I need that? I said, listen, guys, there is a lot I want from the filler side for the future, like even more cheap prime, even more. But with Neuromodel, I'm happy. I'm happy the way it was the last 25, 30 years. I didn't see any actual need for improvement. But where the industry is heading, and Galderma is first with a liquid neuromodulator, but the competitors are certainly working on their versions as well, is that I think in 5 or 10 years from now, we will have a portfolio of neuromodulators with distinct properties, just as we have portfolios of fillers nowadays. I think this is where we're heading, because Azole and Dysport will in no way be discontinued. So they will still be around for probably indefinitely. There will just be different options available. And the main advantage with or some of the main advantages with the liquid neuromodulator with Alluzience are it's free from human serum albumin and animal excipients. So this is something that I can already see in patients, especially the younger ones, is highly appreciated. The awareness of those excipients are in the powder versions is actually not that common in patients. So they do not actually commonly ask us what more is in the vial than the botulinum toxin. But this is something that they appreciate. So it's now solely based on plant and synthesized excipients. That's one advantage. The next one is then when you look at the clinical trials, it's a faster onset. It's 24%, so almost 1 in 4 patients who has an onset of action within 24 hours. That's really fast. And also the duration. Again, it's around 24% of the patients that have at least a 1 grade improvement in glabellar wrinkles after 6 months. So that is quite impressive, I would say.
Yeah, so Christoph just said about the duration and onset of action.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the onset of action. I mean, I guess it's a nice thing to go away and have at least a start of a result within a day. But I've never had a patient sort of complain that their onset of action wasn't within 24 hours or 48 hours. I think that the market is sort of understands that the peak effect is normally around 2 weeks for all of our products. So do you say it as an advantage or not? Practically,
I would say so. That's a good question too. So when I worked with another neuromodulator years ago and switched to Azole, which already has an onset between 2 to 3 days on average, my patients actually commented on the faster onset. So as you say, they would never complain having to wait for a week, 5 to 7 days for the onset. But once they experienced this faster onset, they actually told me that I had gotten better injecting it. When in fact it was due to the product characteristics. And even with the even faster onset now with the Alluzience, it's nothing you can promise because it's individual. Again, it's a 24, 25% of the patients treated. But we live in a time where people do not plan as much. So I have really patients coming in or calling on a Thursday morning. Hey, I forgot I have an event on Saturday, Sunday, and I need to have my face done. So, I mean, there are chances that it will work by then. So I think it's certainly an extra. But as you say, waiting longer has never been a problem. But now that you have the option, people appreciate it.
Yeah.
I have to say that that's a good point. I did even have a patient yesterday say, I've got a party on Saturday. Can I see you on Tuesday? And I said, well, sure, you can. You just won't have the full effect by Saturday. So I guess, if you can add an extra few percentage satisfaction points, why not? I guess.
Well, I guess people before emails were invented thought it was absolutely fine to just write a letter and put it in the post, but then you got emails and people will never go back to that now. So it's like people used to be happy with
exactly.
and Netflix came along.
Well, it is interesting because I know that another company are developing a botulinum toxin E, which supposedly will have its full effect within 24 hours, but it will wear off within 2 weeks, which again is a completely sort of different dynamic and different argument. But I sort of joked with colleagues when I heard about it, and I said, the kind of interesting thing about standard botulinum toxins that we're used to is that you get this slow onset of action. And if you have a complication like, God forbid, a ptosis, it sort of comes gradually, and it almost gives them mental processing time to understand what's happening. And, you might talk about it in its early phase, and you give a little bit of information, and you might give an early treatment. But if their eye drop, within an hour of going home, I think the effect of that side effect is more is amplified.
more dramatic for sure.
It is.
Yeah. Speaking of side effects, so in the clinical trials, they did not see any new side effects in the liquid formula, and the frequency of the headache, the bruises, and then everything else was in line with the traditional powder formulations. But it's interesting because, as we mentioned, there will be in the future portfolio of neuromodulators, depending on the patient need. For something that lasts for 2 weeks, the question is, will the patient be willing to pay just as much as for something that lasts for 6 months? Or is it for those who are uncertain if Botox is for them, or botulinum toxin is for them, just to try it out? Because, our time will not get cheaper. So I think that's a question of where to bring it into your business model. But I'm pretty sure that we will be at that point where we have a choice of neuromodulators with quite distinct properties in a few years from now.
Thanks so much for watching the podcast clip. You can listen to the whole audio episode of the podcast on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And please also leave us a review on the podcast app.
If you like what we do, please smash the like button, consider subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when we release new content.